Hey, glad you made it over. There's a lot of mistakes that EMS quality managers commonly make, at least in my observation. So I thought we'd spend a little bit of time today talking about the top 5. But before we get into it, go grab your cup of coffee and then we'll talk more about EMS quality. So the first common mistake I thought we'd cover is quality managers not getting enough initial and continuing education in quality management. Oftentimes, a great clinician is promoted into a quality management position. Perhaps that's the case with yourself. The management team sometimes isn't as good as they should be about making sure that you get some appropriate education to bring up your insight and skills in formal quality management. Then after you've been in the position for a while, you've got some experience, it's also common not to get much continuing education or professional development in quality management. Now, some of this I have to, kind of put on the management team for having that as part of their process design for onboarding a new quality manager for the organization. But regardless, it's still within your span of control to take personal responsibility for that and go ahead and get quality management training on your own. If you don't have the means or have access to get formal training in quality management, there's a whole lot now you can do just by reading books, buy them used if you need to off of Amazon. There's an awful lot of content on YouTube, including programs like this that can help you get up to speed. If you do have the ability to get support from your organization or have the means to do it on your own financially, I would encourage you to get certified in quality management at some level through the American Society for Quality or the National Association for Healthcare Quality. And this is just going to be so helpful to you and your organization to have that kind of background under your belt so you can do a much better job and have a high quality management program, and then continue your professional development with good, solid, quality management-oriented continuing education. So here's the next one. Not engaging in formal quality improvement projects. And what I mean by a formal quality improvement project is something where you identify very specifically what sort of result you're trying to achieve, what sort of problem you're trying to resolve, and then coming up with very specific ideas on things you might be able to change that will either resolve the problem or get you the kind of results that you're seeking. And then the next step in that formal quality improvement exercise process is then figuring out how will you know whether or not the change you make actually resulted in an improvement. This is going to involve measurement of some sort. You want to do that in an objective and very controlled way. But at the end of this whole process, you will come up with the ideas, you'll test them, you'll measure and see whether or not objectively things have actually improved. And that's quite different than what I commonly observe, where you just go ahead and make a change. You didn't know what the performance of the process was before you made the change. You don't know what the performance of the process was after you made the change. You just decided that making this change will result in the improvement. You went ahead and made the change and left it at that. And that's a mistake. And it's a common mistake, but one that's easily corrected by taking a more formal approach to doing formal quality improvement projects. All right, number 3 on the list, and that's not looking at aggregate data. As you start reviewing charts, whether that's just charts in general or specific types of cases that you like to audit, at a 100% level, so to speak. Maybe all of your high-risk, low-frequency procedures, some of the more serious case types like cardiac arrests, strokes, STEMIs, trauma alerts, those sorts of things. And looking at the individual cases is fine. Maybe that'll be the topic of another conversation about how to do those individual case reviews in a better way. But I would also encourage you to look at the aggregate data. So rather than just knowing how well this particular case did, how well did things go on the last 25 cases or all the cases for a given month or a quarter or even a year? And that way you get a better idea of how the overall organization is working. And that'll give you information like, what's your cardiac arrest survival rate? Again, that's looking at aggregate data, not just cases or data from individual cases. How often when the organization called a STEMI alert, did it actually result in some sort of an intervention by the cardiac cath lab team? Did they actually do an angiogram on an emergent basis? And, perhaps how often did they actually identify the STEMI? We're looking at aggregate data to see how well the organization is improving, which is a reflection on how well the processes of our organization are working. So please try to think about looking at aggregate data rather than just looking at individual cases. All right, number 4, and that's doing subjective chart reviews. Kind of alluded to this a moment ago, but when you're looking at individual cases, there's a very common practice that I see where the quality manager will look at the chart and just read through it, look at the data, and decide whether or not the case went well or not. Did the crew seem to comply with the protocols? Did everything turn out like it should have? And, did the case in general kind of meet that quality manager's expectations for how things should have gone? That's really subjective. So the mistake here is not using a more objective and consistent process for doing those chart reviews. I would encourage you to use a checklist and have specific criteria to decide whether or not the case was appropriately managed or not. Say it's a stroke case or suspected stroke case. Did the crews perform a blood glucose check? Did they document the last known well time? How soon was it from after they completed their stroke screen and stroke severity scoring and made a determination that they were going to call a stroke alert, that the hospital was actually notified? Using the checklist to answer those questions and gather those pieces of data allows you to combine all of those different cases together and do it objectively. Because I think there's going to be a tendency, it's just human nature, that you're going to look at the first case in the list of cases you're going to review at a particular session differently than you'll look at the last case, particularly if it's a big list of cases that you have to go through. So you want to do those case evaluations objectively rather than subjectively, and the tool like a checklist will really help you with that. And here's number 5. Focusing on educational corrective actions rather than process design issues. When quality managers identify an issue, there's a very common practice to call the crews in and attempt to provide some sort of remedial education. Review the protocols, go over what it is that should have happened and that didn't happen, and kind of put it onto the crews to try to do better next time. And there may be some circumstances in which that might be appropriate, but going back to tip number one, as you get more training in formal quality management, you'll begin to appreciate the fact that most issues you run into that impact quality are not the result of people neglecting to do things consciously or anything like that. It's more about the process design issues. That's where your primary focus should be, is what was the underlying flaw in the process design that allowed or made it more likely for this type of problem to occur in the first place. That should be really the primary focus of your efforts, is trying to find the underlying process design issue that you could improve to make it less likely for any similar sort of error to occur in the future, rather than assuming it's an educational problem and calling in the crews and really putting it on them to try to do better next time. So there you have it, my top 5 common mistakes that EMS quality managers make. I don't know if any of those apply to you. Maybe they do. But regardless, something to think about while you finish up your coffee, and then please go out and try something.